DMing for hire.
We've been teasing this for a while.
Yeah, getting paid to be a dungeon master. I know probably most people out there in tabletop RPG world are DMs as a hobby, but there are people who are paid to be a dungeon master. And so we wanted to talk about that and talk about the difference between doing it as a hobby versus doing it as a source of income in the gig economy, and also kind of where this comes from and if it fits in with the hobby or if it shouldn't be a part of the hobby. What are the hurdles and obstacles and all that stuff. So we have an expert here on every edition of being a DM for hire, which is Jesse, who's been doing it for a couple years.
Hello and welcome to Every Edition, your tabletop RPG talk show. I'm Jesse.
I'm John.
And today for the Loot the Body, we're going to be talking about Dragon Town.
Yes, we are. In our random encounter, DMs for hire, paying to play Dungeons and Dragons.
You pay to play Dungeons and Dragons?
I do.
And of course, we'll talk about our morale check. But John, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Things are going well. I've been up in my game in terms of the social media stuff.
Okay. I've definitely seen the push.
Yeah, I've said this before on on the channel that I haven't been on social media for 2 years. Right. I came back to social media for Every Edition, and it's been really fun. And I'm gonna date myself, and I'm old, but I just discovered self promo Saturday.
Sure.
Right. And so it's been a great time to interact with people and to learn about new projects and to also introduce people to Every Edition. So I wanted to give a shout out to Veil of the Void Reforged, which is a storytelling sci-fi tabletop RPG that's put out by SDG Creatives. And Trevor over there at SDG Creatives actually sent us a copy of their game, Veil of the Void Reforged. It's a sci-fi game, so he's been, he knows that that's sort of what we're thinking about. And its strength really seems to be in character customization.
Okay.
So check out Veil of the Void Reforged, and thanks, Trevor, for sending over a copy of the game.
And I've caught myself many times scrolling through our Twitter, learning about different things going on Saturdays because it is self-promotion. So, we're also looking at other products and other people who are promoting themselves. So it's kind of been like my source of news and information on RPG stuff, especially in Zemo. A lot of things going on, a lot of new stuff coming out for Kickstarter and stuff. So
yes.
It's a good place for news and upcoming things.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to retweet and send out as much news as we can and share the love of tabletop role-playing games. But Jesse, how are you doing?
Oh, man, I am very pumped. So I haven't played in a Magic event in person for 8 months or something like that.
Yeah.
We had done a Dungeons and Dragons Magic event.
Yeah.
When that set came out last summer, it was right before the podcast too, so we couldn't really talk about it.
Right.
But the next set is Kamigawa. I've talked about it a couple times. It's cyberpunk, sci-fi, magic stuff, and I'm going to be heading to the Star City event. It's the first one that they're doing back from the pandemic. I'm super pumped. I'm going to be doing a lot of side events. I'm going to get some signatures from artists that I like. I'm really excited about it.
Cool.
And in other news, sort of D&D adjacent, the Critical Role's animated series, the Legends of Vox Machina, dropped on Amazon very recently. And I think about half the episodes are currently out. I'm not sure exactly how long the season is supposed to be, but I'm already hearing a lot of really good things about it. And if you like their actual play episodes, you'll like their animated stuff too. But it is a sort of far cry. I watched the trailer, and it definitely seems it's more scripted. It's not there's no dice rolling or anything like that. It's pure role play, but they're all voice actors, all the people who play their characters. So it's very professionally done, and it's produced by Amazon, so they've got a lot of money behind it.
Yeah, I'm more interested in this in the animated series than I am anything Critical Role's done apart from the Wildemont book.
Sure.
The Wildemont book was great. I enjoyed it, not knowing anything about Critical Role. And I'm going to check out this animated series and see what it's all about. All right, it's time for a morale check. Morale checks are when we take a look at the tabletop role-playing game industry and cover things that are new and exciting coming around the corner and things that we want to highlight. So it is Zine month. Zemo.
Zemo's still on?
Zemo's still on. So check out zinemonth.com to see all the different zines that are coming out this month from lots of different independent creators. I wanted to highlight a Merkborg release, Holy Artifacts of the Sacred Tragedies. It's a trio of pamphlet adventures from Merkborg being put out by Storywood from San Antonio, Texas. It accidentally launched early, which was fine. I was right on it.
Yeah.
I think I said last time when we were talking about Zine Month, I'm looking for Merkborg stuff, I'm looking for Mothership stuff, and I'm looking for Old School Essentials stuff. And so I've got them all flagged and ready to rock. And that one took me right to a live Kickstarter, and I was like, oh, great.
Deal.
It successfully funded right away. So obviously other people were doing that too.
Yeah.
And the campaign for Holy Artifacts of the Sacred Tragedies is now going to run for a couple extra weeks. Support it. It looks awesome. Three different pamphlets that can be played as individual adventures, or you can string them together to make a campaign. It's one of the exciting things about the Merkborg game is collecting for it right now and all the cool third-party support.
Art is awesome.
Yeah, art is great. So take a look at that, and take a look at all the different releases happening this month during Zine Month.
So from Steamforged Games, we've got a little bit of news for Dark Souls, which will be getting a 5th edition core rulebook. For those of you who are unaware, Dark Souls is it's a Souls-like game. It's a video game. It's a series of games. I think they've made 3 so far.
Okay.
It's been out since like the early 2000s. It's a particular style of game where the gameplay is very unforgiving. So you play just sort of like a dude who you customize, and you can make like an archer or a wizard or like a fighter with a bunch of armor or whatever, and you go up to these big bad guys who can like kill you in one hit.
Okay.
They do one slash, all your HP's gone, and you're like, oh crap, oh my god. So you like roll away, and it's a lot of like dodge mechanics and parry mechanics. And then the bosses are like these epic bosses, these gigantic, real like cinematic fights, where you have to really learn the mechanics of the boss to be able to do it. And once you learn the mechanics, it's easy, but the game is traditionally a very difficult game to learn. And there's 3 of them. I played through the first 2. It's not my type of game because like I'm quick to get frustrated with that type of thing. So I was just like, nah. So
where's my plot armor?
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to die. I want to play 5th edition.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how they're going to translate it to 5th edition, because if you could capture that sort of unforgiving boss fight and sort of have like a Dungeon Crawl Classics aspect where maybe you have a bunch of different characters, or it's kind of expected that you'll die and you'll sort of re-roll as like a similar character or something, or if each boss fight is like the crux that your characters lead to. It's also interesting because Dark Souls is a solo game.
Okay.
You can play through, I think, the second one or the third one co-op, so you can do 2 people. So it'll be interesting to see how they translate that to 5th edition. But I think it's going to be great. The lore for that game is super great, super
cool.
awesome, and the overall monster design is really awesome.
All right, so it could bring something to the game. It
could be something way different.
I don't know anything about Dark Souls, but it sounds to me like the fact that it's like unforgiving and you're sort of like dodging and parrying and stuff. That sounded to me, or like reminded me of like old school retro games that like are very, very hard and very challenging and very unforgiving. Games like, the original stuff on the Nintendo Entertainment System, Castlevania and Mega Man 2 and all that kind of stuff, where, you know, now you've got all the speed challenges and stuff like that. But man, as a kid, like, you were banging your head against the wall, right? And in a lot of those games, you would get to a point where, well, that's as far as I can go, and that's as far as I'm ever going to be able to go.
Yeah.
And like,
it's got that same sort of feel, like if you didn't have like a memory card or something and you turned it off and you turned it back on, or you died or whatever, you'd start back at the beginning. In Dark Souls, if you die, you go back to the last point that you saved.
Okay.
Or like you rested at a bonfire. In that game, you rested at a bonfire. If you didn't rest at a bonfire 2 bosses ago, you die, you go all the way back, and you got to do everything to get back there. It's very unforgiving. So I'm curious to see how Steamforge is going to tackle this. It seems like it could be done really well, or it could just flop. So
cool, new stuff for 5e. Bring it on. In other news, the Alien RPG is seeing its 3rd cinematic adventure release. This one is called Heart of Darkness. And it's going to complete the trilogy of cinematic releases that they had that started with Chariot of the Gods in the starter set, and then went with Destroyer of Worlds, and now this 3rd one, Heart of Darkness. So pre-orders are up on Free League, and we continue to be enthusiastic about the Alien RPG, and more to say about that in future episodes.
Oh yeah. Also, you talked about Kamigawa a little bit. I'm interested to see if Wizards wants to go with a sort of Strixhaven style of production with Kamigawa. So Strixhaven, we didn't have very much in the way of lore going into it, but they still expedited a D&D 5th edition book to come very shortly after. Kamigawa, we have a lot of people, myself included, very excited about this new Magic set, very excited about the old stuff. There's a lot of new lore being pumped into this. I'm very curious to see if they're going to do anything D&D related, because as of right now, we only know that the Monsters of the Multiverse regular edition is going to release in May. We know that the next Critical Role book comes out, I believe, in April, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
We don't know anything beyond that for the rest of the year, which is kind of surprising. So I wouldn't be surprised if, like, when the set comes out in late February, if they announced some Kamigawa D&D related things.
Yeah, and Spelljammer's got to be in there somewhere. Like, come on.
Yeah, so
like a summer release, or
the main bad guy of this set is someone who uses a Spelljammer-esque like weapon that allows them to transport between planes.
Okay.
So some of the main characters are planeswalkers who just have that innate ability to move between planes. But some people who aren't planeswalkers need the ability to go between planes, so they use like Spelljammer ships that are not Spelljammer ships but are.
Right.
Or they use like big devices that help them do that.
So there's a synergy that already exists between Magic and D&D that kind of maybe it's going to, Kamigawa's even going to be pushing us towards Spelljammer? Is that
I think it could be. It's definitely like, you know, in the sci-fi realm, so they could have, you know, spaceships or Spelljammer ships that help the planeswalkers get to other places, or help characters, and that could explain or give a good excuse to bring in Kamigawa's world into 5th edition as a place that you can go and adventure in. So I want to know what you think about the growing synergies between Magic and D&D. You know, they're both owned by Wizards of the Coast. They've been very heavy-handed on the trying to get, you know, more Magic into D&D and more D&D into Magic.
The walls are breaking down.
They are breaking down. So we started with the Ravnica book. Then a couple years later, there was the Theros book. And now in 1 year, we got the Strixhaven one. And there's like some inklings of things happening with more Magic this year. So I want to hear what you think. Let us know at everyeditionrpg.com. You can find all our socials there. And let us know down in the comments below. I
think we're also getting, isn't Baldur's Gate going to be a set over the summer?
Yeah, so early summer, there's going to be a Magic the Gathering set that is focused around Baldur's Gate.
So it's going both ways.
It is going both ways.
Cool. Check out everyeditionrpg.com to find links to all of our socials. Thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. We've been seeing more attention to the channel, which we absolutely love, and we're continuing to grow and put out as much good quality discussions and tabletop RPG content as we can.
Oh, yeah.
Send us a note, everyeditionrpg@gmail.com, if you want to answer one of our questions, or you've got some ideas for the show, or
let us know.
Just drop us a note. All right, it's time for a random encounter. Today's random encounter is DMing for hire.
We've been teasing this for a while.
Yeah, getting paid to be a dungeon master. I know probably most people out there in tabletop RPG world are DMs as a hobby, but there are people who are paid to be a dungeon master. And so we wanted to talk about that and talk about the difference between doing it as a hobby versus doing it as a source of income in the gig economy, and also kind of where this comes from, and if it fits in with the hobby or if it shouldn't be a part of the hobby. What are the hurdles and obstacles and all that stuff. So we have an expert here on every edition of being a DM for hire, which is Jesse, who's been doing it for a couple of years. So Jesse, how did you get started being a DM for hire?
So I had one group, your group, approach me as a full group of players, or at least, enough players to make a group that needed someone to DM because everybody wanted to play. And you had reached out. You knew that I DM'd at the store that I worked at.
Right.
I was playing D&D every week. I was playing a lot of D&D. And at the time, I said, hey, I don't really have time to devote to an extra group. I already have these X amount of groups going on as like a hobby thing. And you countered with the, hey, why don't I pay you? Why don't we pay you to run us through this stuff? And I hadn't ever really thought of it because that doesn't, I thought of D&D as a hobby. I mean, I still do, but it didn't ever occur to me that people could get paid for this. So I started researching a little bit, and there are communities of people sort of all around the world that do D&D for hire. And I looked into pricing and things like that, and I think we bounced back and forth on what we wanted from the group. And we did our session 0, and we just wrapped up our campaign the other week, and that was 2 years of stuff. And from then, the DM for hire stuff has only grown for me.
That's great. I remember, coming to you and knowing that you worked in a store and were already essentially being paid to be a DM by working in a hobby store, a comic shop. And so to me, it didn't seem weird at all. We were acquaintances. We've since become much more friendly, and started our podcast together. But we started off as acquaintances, and I just said, "Hey, love to have you do this. I know you run in the shop," and so it made perfect sense to me. It wasn't weird at all, because we didn't know each other super well. We weren't super close, but at the same time, you were already doing it as a job.
There's a lot of people in the community. This topic in general is very heated. Yeah. No matter when it's talked about, there's always people on both sides, nobody ever in the middle. There's people who are really for it, like myself, and there's people who are really against it. You should never make money doing this, or you shouldn't charge for this. I really don't understand that argument, but everybody that was in our group was sort of already ready to go. Like, we want to play this game. We know that this is taking time out of your busy week, so we're going to pay you to do it for more incentive. And that also that creates a little bit more incentive for all the people to show up. Yeah, including the DM.
Well, and in our group, we were all very honest. We had taken turns DMing, and I was mostly the game master, mostly the dungeon master, and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to be a player, and nobody else really wanted to do it either. But we wanted to play, and so this was the idea to keep the games going, keep the good times rolling. And it worked for us, and it was right before the pandemic, which also was a wonderful outlet for staying, keeping socializing, and so I was very grateful for hooking up with you and having that arrangement where we were hiring you.
The switch to Roll20 was a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly we couldn't meet in person when the pandemic started. And that was a critical moment where if we didn't switch to Roll20, our group probably would have fizzled. But we did, and we maintained contact. And all throughout the pandemic, I still worked, but I didn't have, get-togethers. I didn't have D&D, but keeping that online stuff and the DM for hire groups that I had that moved online really kept me sane when I was still connecting with people. And I think overall DMing for hire has given me an awesome outlet and a really interesting life path.
Mm-hmm. When I think about DMing for hire, I think about being a musician. I think about music, because to me it's not all that different. There are a lot of people who play the guitar, play the bass, play the drums, even have a band, but for the most part it's a hobby.
It's for fun.
Right? It's something they do for fun. And money occasionally is involved, right? If they go out on a little tour or something like that, or they play at a local club and they get, $50, $100 or something like that. But for the most part, it's not, it's not a source of income. Mm-hmm. For you, it is, right?
It is now.
For you,
it is
right?
a pillar of my income.
Yeah. And so that's, at that point, when more money is involved, it's not a hobby, which is weird on the one hand, because we talk about tabletop role-playing games as a hobby.
Yeah.
Right? The hobby of tabletop role-playing games. But of course, there are a lot of people in this industry, right? A lot of people who make the games and sell the games.
Exactly.
And a lot of people who pack the boxes and ship them off and run conventions and make money off of conventions that don't make a game. There's podcasts and all this. So it's a hobby, but it's also an industry. And just because, one person's interaction with tabletop role-playing games is strictly a hobby, right? Doesn't mean that has to be 100% just a hobby for everybody, because if it was, we wouldn't have games.
Yeah.
Right?
Nobody would be making them.
And in the case of our story, we wouldn't have had a game master or a dungeon master at the time.
Exactly.
So to me, it feels a lot like music. There are plenty of people that are in a band that basically play gigs for free and play for their friends, and it's fun and it's a hobby. Okay. That's great. And, but then there's plenty of people that make money off of it because it is an industry too. So, I mean, even when we talk about, when we're doing news on this show, we say the tabletop role-playing game industry, right? It's an industry. This is a business, right? So it's
a lot of entertainment going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of entertainment going on, and it has value, right? That's the thing that blows me away. It is worth it to me to pay somebody for a great game where I can sit down at the table, have fun with my friends, and not have to do any preparation. That's worth something. That's worth dollars and cents, right?
It's also a kind of a no-brainer for me to charge because I have so many groups. Some people, if they DM or GM for a couple of groups, maybe they have 2 or 3 groups that they do every week, maybe. That could be their limit. That could be their fun time. They like to do that. That's their hobby. That's cool. But my time is a lot more limited than that. I have my job. I have stuff that I like to do, like my personal life, other hobbies, and then all of my DM groups. And at some point, my time has to be charged for because I'm doing so many things, so much preparation. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. When I go back to the idea of value, and the first time that I paid for Dungeons and Dragons was the first time I went to Origins or Gen Con.
Yep.
Right? The first time I went to a big convention. You pay
to get in.
You pay to get in, and you're paying for the opportunity to try new games, to play with a specific dungeon master, or try a specific adventure, or to be in a tournament. Folks, you're paying for D&D. Like, there it is, right? And some of the best games I've ever played, some of the most memorable moments I've had with friends have been at conventions, right? So that wasn't free. That wasn't people doing it as a hobby, right? I understand that there are people that volunteer to
DMs
be
mostly
but there's plenty of people there that are doing it for money too, and that are doing it as their job, and are game masters or DMs for part of their job because they're advertising their game or something like that. So to me, it doesn't seem strange at all. It feels like a natural evolution for something that clearly is bringing a lot of joy and a lot of value to people's lives. When you create value, you that is worth something, right? Like you're literally bringing value into the world by being a dungeon master, being a game master. And so you deserve to be compensated.
And I've seen like, oh, you shouldn't compensate your DM with money. You should compensate them with snacks or swag and gifts and things like that. And that's fine if they're okay with that.
If they're doing it for a hobby.
But like, I can't pay my bills in snacks and swag.
Sure.
So
sure.
I need money.
No, and I think, when I game master, right, I'm not doing it for money. I am just doing it as a hobby. I mostly do it for my family.
Sure.
Right. And sometimes for some friends for a one shot or something like that.
Sure.
But I honestly don't feel like I have the bandwidth right now to do a sustained campaign. Right. Plus, I really love playing. I mean, that's always been, right? That's always been where it's at for me. Yeah, so snacks and swag work for me like that. If my group, buys me a book or, buys the pizza that night or whatever, that's awesome. And it's nice to show gratitude to your game master or dungeon master, even when it is a hobby experience. But it is, it doesn't have to be just that. Like it's not regrettable that I'm paying for D&D. It's not polluting the experience or making the experience weird. Let's talk about that. The experience of running a game where you're getting paid. How is it different, or how does it feel? How do you maintain the fact that it is, that this is fun, that this is friends getting together, that it's not about the money? How do you keep it, for the people that are playing, it's not about the money?
I'm very awkward and very, I don't like talking about money. Mm-hmm. I know it's a necessity.
Yeah.
And if it comes to it, I need to, remind somebody that they have to pay or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like doing that. So I try not to.
Okay.
But I can see where that could be a bad thing, but I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
I go into preparing a little bit more seriously than I would for a game that nobody's paying for, because people are paying for it. Mm-hmm. They expect a certain level. They expect a certain experience. They expect a certain level of professionalism. I have to know what I'm doing. I can't go to a session like if I was doing a free-to-play game. I know there have been times where I've woken up 30 minutes before the game, not having prepared anything, brought the book, and said, all right, let's go. No preparation at all. And that's okay, but if you're paying for that experience and your DM comes to the table not prepared at all, you're going to be very unhappy. It's not going to be the same kind of flow. It's not going to be the same game at all. So I treat my preparation time very seriously.
Yeah.
And prepping for like an average 4-hour session takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. I estimate about half the time of the session is the prep time. And that time might not be I sit down for an hour and a half or 2 hours and read and compile things. That time happens over the course of the week or however long it takes for us to get to the next session. Mm-hmm. And I'm always sort of thinking about things that I can add to games. But I estimate about half the session time goes into prep. And depending on travel time, if it's in person, there could be an hour's worth of travel time, which means an hour out of my day. It means gas. Mm-hmm. It means, buying snacks for myself to make sure that I'm hydrated or things like that, because I don't ever expect there to be food or drinks or whatever at the place where I'm going. Most of the time there is, but I don't ever expect that because I think that that's rude and I shouldn't do that. So I do treat them like separate entities. It is part of my income, so I want to maintain the reputation. Mm-hmm. I want to maintain the happiness and success of the campaign, so it keeps going.
Yeah.
I want to, coerce groups into moving to my homebrew campaign, so it keeps the campaign going, or go to another book, so I can keep that thing going. And if I show myself in a bad light, like the DM who never prepares, or the DM who's always late, that's not good, and people are going to drop you very quick. Mm-hmm.
So players as clients.
Sure.
That's one of the things that I heard you kind of like skirting around, the idea that you do treat the people that you are that you're game mastering for, that you're dungeon mastering for, that they're expecting a certain thing. And so you raise your game a little bit in terms of preparation and the way that you're prepared. So it is more of like a client relationship. So a couple things that occur to me with that is, oftentimes in a relationship with a client, you want to keep the client happy.
Yeah.
Right? That there are times in a role-playing game where you're not going to be happy. And I guess the point there would be making sure to separate, that what's happening still it's not about like your character always winning or being successful. Sure. It's about the shared experience being successful. Mm-hmm. And that shared experience doesn't mean that you always get your way, right? It doesn't mean that you always win. It doesn't mean that your character stays alive, right? So it does occur to me that there's that aspect to the game where you wouldn't want to be like somebody who's just always, just like giving out inspiration, like as almost like in-game currency or something like that, or what?
So I am pretty liberal with magic items. I think that's just a flaw as me as a DM. I really like magic items, so I really want people to use them. Yeah, and not just like magic items from the DM's guide. I like to find magic items from various sources like Patreon or whatnot. Mm-hmm. Just gotta like magic items. They're fun and they're flavorful. They make things unique. But yeah, it's a weird dynamic. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's because most of the groups that I've dealt with, I've yet to deal with a group of complete strangers. Mm-hmm. All of my groups have had either one or two people or more that I have known previously that were at least acquaintances, that had either a family or like a group of people of their own, that had some new players. That it creates a different dynamic. Mm-hmm. So it's been nice to know some of the people in the group. I imagine with a group of complete strangers, it would be a little bit, I don't know, a little different somehow. I'd have to maybe lay some ground rules or sort of feel out the party as things go on. And I think the session 0 is a really good spot as a DM to, while everybody's making their characters and you do like a little one shot, you can kind of get a feel for how the players are and how they react to, rules or rules lawyering or your style as a DM. I think you have to be malleable when it comes to each group and have a different style of play with each group. Like I have one group that, quite frankly, like never gets anything done. They are very much there to have a good time and just hang out and have fun and like roll some dice while we're doing it. So that's a little bit different than a game where I might have everybody who's like on story all the time. We are playing from the moment we sit down until the moment we leave. And I don't really know if anybody in my groups would care if their character died in terms of like, oh, I can't believe you did that. Like they would care because they're attached to their character or whatnot. Yeah. But I think I've ingrained it in most of my players that like I'm the type of DM who cares a lot about the story, and I want your characters to be a part of that story, and I want there to be consequences to your actions. So I'm not afraid to have a green dragon spew a breath on half of the party and down half of the party. Right. I literally did it last week. Okay. Like they were
sorry about that.
Yeah, they were not expecting it, and it's the consequences of your actions. And I think I do pepper in those wins because everybody needs some wins to keep them going. Sure. And to keep things positive and great. But there also needs to be some peppering of like, smacking their hand. I'm the DM. Yeah. Like, we got to keep things under wrap. You got to know that your characters aren't safe, that kind of thing. Yeah. I sort of boast a lot that I've never killed a PC. I've been DMing for like almost 8 years, and I've never killed a PC. And some people are like, oh, that's lame, total party kills are like my favorite thing about D&D. I total party killed a bunch of level 1s. And it's like, okay, do you feel happy about yourself? Like, I'm sad for the people who are in your game. Like, we're playing D&D, we're playing heroes, we're playing people who aspire to be heroes. I want to have some feel good moments. So I try to keep the death and destruction just sort of loosely peppered in there. To make things like sort of have weight.
So what does it mean to be a professional dungeon master or professional game master? I'm less interested in actually the money aspect of it, right? That it doesn't, because you get paid for it, doesn't automatically make you a professional in my mind.
Sure.
What makes you a professional is your ability to navigate the different groups, right? Your ability to set a high standard for yourself, to have a good game. Those are the things that are going to make somebody a professional. I think the other piece of it too is, how many groups do you have right now?
Right now, 6. I'm looking to add a 7th.
Okay.
I have a 7th group.
So 6 or 7 different groups of people that get together. I'm going to say something controversial. Most people that are a dungeon master for as a hobby and strictly for a hobby probably don't have more than 1 or 2 groups.
Yep.
Right. So the fact that you have 6 or 7 groups and you have to navigate all those different dynamics and all those different games that people want. That, I think, at the end of the day, is what makes you a professional.
It's a lot of mental space.
And the only way that you can literally survive and do the many groups is to receive monetary compensation. Yeah. So that, to me, that's what it's all about. That's what makes you a professional. The one thing I'd love to hear you think about or talk about is if it does force you to play a certain kind of game or tell a certain kind of story. So let me tell you what I'm thinking here.
Sure.
My favorite way of playing as a dungeon master would be to sit down at the table and not necessarily have a whole lot planned.
Okay.
And have just some random charts and not have a story per se. Just kind of let the moment kind of go. And it's very focused on imagination and sharing time with your friends and just kind of going with the flow.
It's fun.
Right?
Improv.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's the kind of game that I like to run and the kind of game that I like to play. As a DM for hire, though, it strikes me that would be harder to do. Less of because you're getting paid, you want to be prepared, and you want to make sure that you're going to be giving a good experience. I think when you're doing that kind of free rolling, it's not to say that there's not preparation involved, but there's more of a risk of it not necessarily being a good game. I don't. Yeah. What do you think?
So, with preparation specifically, I don't want to be. So I won't if I'm reading through a chapter of a D&D module, I won't read every single word. Mm-hmm. I'll read okay, we're about to go into a dungeon. Here's all the dialogue. Here's the things that I need to read at the time. Yeah. Here's the mood. Here's what everything looks like, and then here's the important rooms in a house or in a dungeon. Here's all the non-important ones. I don't need to read all of those. Mm-hmm. Just keep going. Keep moving through the pages. That way, when I'm in front of the group and we've got a map out and we're in the dungeon and they go into this room, I know, okay, this is where I saw that room before. I'm going to read out the description. Here's what it is. And sometimes, those room descriptions, at least in the modules, don't have, the character wants to look in, I want to roll for investigation to see if there's anything under this table. Yeah. And that's where I'll bring in the randomness. I'll say, okay, well, I feel like, giving out some gold or some magic items, let's roll on the magic item table. That's where I'll bring in the randomness and keep it fun for that specific group. Okay. I don't want to be the DM who comes in and says, okay, hang on, let me read this whole paragraph first. Right. And then repeat it back to you, and then read the next dialogue thing, and then read that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be the page turner DM. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But if a group comes to a session expecting 3 to 4 hours of game time where they're playing and not on their phones, mm-hmm. They're not going to pay me the X amount of money to be on their phones while I'm reading. Right. They're going to want to be playing. They're going to want to be involved and things like that. So I want to keep things moving. I want to keep people off of their phones. I want to keep them engaged. That way they feel like the time that they spent or the money that they spent was worth it.
Well, and again, that idea of being a professional would be knowing when to work in randomness, and when and maybe just have more of a structure to when randomness
Sure.
makes the most sense. Yeah, and so it is. It does seem like it's all about the preparation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes you a pro. That's what people are paying for. They're expecting a good game, but what that really means is that you're ready to facilitate. That you, the dungeon master who's being paid, are ready to facilitate a good game, right? So you're shouldering the responsibility. The only responsibility the players have as your clients is to have fun.
It's to show up and have fun.
Show up and have fun.
And if they don't have fun, then it's probably my fault. So
Okay.
I don't want them to experience that. And so far, I've not had anybody sort of come forward and be like, hey, I really didn't like this session, or I didn't like what you did with my character. It could just be because the people I play with are really nice and really kind, but I've not had any sort of bad clients, if you want to say that. So
Good. The word entrepreneur, it's not a bad word.
Yeah.
Right? Art has always involved money and fun. Having a good time has almost always cost money, right?
Entertainment.
Being entertained. Like it. So what? Let's talk about the money then.
Okay.
Let's talk about how much do you charge? How did you determine that?
Sure.
Those sorts of things.
So if somebody were to come to me and say, I have a group of 5 people or 6 people or whatever that I need a DM for, how much does it cost? So I would say it is $5 per person per hour.
Okay.
With a minimum session time of 3 hours.
Okay.
That's I think 3 hours is a good session. 2 hours, you sit down, you set up, and nothing happens.
Yep.
3 hours, okay. 4 hours is like my sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I start to like decline in my ability to talk forever. But that ends up being, if you go 4 hours, that's $20 a person, and depending on how many people, it could scale from $80 to $150 or $160 or whatever. I never charge for a session 0 because I want that time. It's typically about 4 hours. I want that time for everybody to get together, make their characters together. Me to like lay the ground rules and say like, hey, these are my DM styles. Here's the things that I care about. Here's the things that I don't care about. We can figure out the book that we're going to play, or if we're going to do homebrew or anything like that. I think that's a good starting point, and I've been operating on that price structure for almost 3 years now. I'm now looking to, now that I am making DM for hire a bigger pillar of my income, I'm looking to increase that for newer groups and add on additional things like, sort of traditional getting music ready and having bigger maps or terrain, a little bit more oomph to the campaign.
Cool. I'm like Gen X,
Sure.
right? And the idea of the sort of comfort that younger generations have with being an entrepreneur, it's fascinating to me because someone from my generation, like we grew up, and again I'll make a music analogy, but we grew up with Fugazi. And Fugazi was like, we're only charging $5 for our shows,
sure,
right? And that's all it's going to be. And we're not in this for the money. We want to, you had all the criticism of Green Day selling out,
sure,
and, when they signed to a major label, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm growing up in that early '90s punk rock, Nirvana being uncomfortable with being famous and all that sort of stuff. And so that's my sort of background in thinking about all this. And so this sort of like uncomfortableness that Generation X has with sort of art and money, right? And I think that bleeds over into thinking about DMing for hire. Like I do think that my generation, that because we sort of like are distrustful, like, oh, the money's gonna, it's gonna ruin the experience, or it's
sure,
gonna change everything. It's because when we were teenagers, that's what we were told by pop music and
sure,
and punk rock and stuff like that.
You never did it for the money.
Yeah. And I've heard you say there are criticisms out there of people saying like younger generations are all about the money. They're so greedy, and that's not it at all. Like it's just a different I see a lot of more exciting entrepreneurs that are young. And I actually regret that my generation was so weird about money, right? And like, kind of didn't want to mix, their art and money and never saw artistic endeavors as entrepreneurial. They wanted to keep them pure. That's kind of naive.
So a couple things, like being paid to DM opens up a lot of avenues. Mm-hmm. Like I can buy terrain. I can buy other books that aren't 5th edition books that could influence the way that I play the game.
Yeah.
I can buy other RPGs to introduce to the groups so we continue having fun times.
Yeah.
It's a good, it's a source of income.
Right.
So if I'm not DMing for hire, I wouldn't have that money to spend on that stuff. Mm-hmm. I really don't understand the sort of hesitancy. Mm-hmm. My argument to I've had, I think, 2 groups come to me and be like, we want you to DM, but like we're not quite sure about paying. Like we've never done this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I always liken it to going to the movies. If you go to the movies once a month, that's like if you and one other person go, that's $40. Mm-hmm. If you and your family goes, that's like $80 to $100. Mm-hmm. And you might go to the movies once a month, or maybe sometimes even twice a month if it's something good. And you're paying for popcorn, you're paying for your seats, you're paying for 2 hours of entertainment for your whole family, plus driving there, whatnot. You pay for me to DM you, you get 4 hours of entertainment with a group of friends. It's really fun. Sometimes people bring snacks, and it's like half the cost of a movie.
Yeah.
And I really don't understand how people are having this like mental block of it being entertainment. Entertainment has always cost money. Mm-hmm. You go to a music show, or you go to see a band play, you pay money to get in. Mm-hmm. You go to a convention, you pay money to get in. You go to a movie, you pay for the movie. Mm-hmm. I don't see how this could be any different.
Yeah, it to me, it's an outgrowth of the gig economy, right? If you think about the gig economy, and some of that has to do, I think, with young people needing, because there aren't as good jobs, they have to hustle.
Yeah.
Right? And so in some sense, that is what it is.
Yeah. It's just like the way that the world is right now.
Yeah. And so the fact that you might hire you to be a game master or dungeon master, great. Like
it also like I don't have a traditional career. I'm not a person who works construction. I don't make the buku bucks.
Yeah.
But being paid to do this opens up the avenue of me continuing to be paid to do this.
Yeah.
This is clearly something that I enjoy, something that I think that I'm good at, and this is a career path that I can take, that this has allowed me to continue forward with. And I think that isn't just for this industry, it's for all industries with like the gig economy and artists in general. I think that there's more room in our society's economy for people like myself who want to explore this thing, and I think there's people who, want to pay for it. Clearly, I've got groups going, and there's people who want the entertainment and are willing to pay for it. So there's got to be people like me who supply that.
Yeah, well, it adds value to people's lives, and so that's, at the end of the day, that's worth something.
And I want to stress, like, if you don't want to pay for D&D, don't. Just find a DM, or DM yourself, or GM whatever game you want to play. Don't pay. There's so much argument and so much stigma around DM for hire. The people who don't want to pay for DMs just don't.
Yeah, nobody's forcing you.
Yeah. I'm not reaching in your wallet and taking the money out myself. Like, it's okay, and that's okay if you don't want to play.
Yeah. No, and with coming out of the pandemic, I'm so thankful for something like Roll20. But there are other platforms like what is that one? Start Play. Yeah. Different way. That's an opportunity to try new games, right? To essentially have almost like a convention experience every day.
Yeah.
Right. And that is like playing with strangers at a convention, trying a new game if you want to. But for those people that don't have, a group of people that are also into tabletop role-playing games, it's another avenue to keep the hobby going. I mean, and quite honestly, the hobby's grown And one of the reasons it's grown, I'm sure, is because people have more opportunities to pay for Dungeons and Dragons,
Yes.
to pay for role-playing games. And so part of this sort of surge is because of DM for hire and game mastering for hire and more opportunities to play, to pay to play on virtual tabletops
Yep.
and stuff like that.
I agree. More opportunities means more people playing.
Yep, it's not a bad thing. It feels to me like a natural evolution of the hobby, and it to me, like I said, the first time I paid for a game was Gen Con, was Origins, right? Gen Con '93.
Nice.
So like get your head there if you're resistant, and if you don't have to pay for it, still take care of your dungeon master.
Yes,
like
at least thank them.
yeah, say thank you. Buy the pizza for them. Maybe consider chipping in on the campaign book or
Sure,
whatever.
yeah.
That kind of stuff. Jesse, are there any initial tips? Any advice that you would give a would-be DM for hire?
So I think the biggest thing is the hurdle of getting yourself over wanting to be paid or talking to people about being paid. And I think you can sort of angle it with like maybe your group that you're already playing with. You can say, hey, if you all paid me this amount for the next session, I can go out and buy the new book and we could all enjoy it. Or I can go out and buy some new terrain or a new map for us or some new minis or some paints so I can have a boss. You can start it with your group that you're already playing with, or you can just sort of put yourself out there and say, you can make a Facebook listing of, hey, I'm a DM. Maybe there's not that many DMs in your area, and there's infinite amount of Discord groups and Facebook groups that are for specific areas, like the area that you live in, that are catered towards like geeky and nerdy things. And you can put out an ad and be like, hey, I'm really good at DMing. Would anybody be up to trying this with me? And you can start lower than what I charge. You could start higher than what I charge. Maybe you're really good at setting an atmosphere and you have tons of resources ready to go in terms of like music and lighting and things like that. Or maybe you're willing to travel farther than other people. Try to find the thing that makes you stand out as a DM and really sort of try to sell that. And I think the money will come.
Yeah. It occurred to me that it's not unlike stand-up comedy.
Sure.
Like maybe if you want to get into this, you should hook up with a hobby shop, right? And you should say, hey, I could run some games for you or something like that. And that's the equivalent of like open mic.
Sure.
Right? And then
get your face in front of people.
You get your face in front of people and you get known, and then you're also meeting potential clients, right? You're meeting potential people who might want a game, and you got that home base, right, where you can sort of
everybody can meet at that one place.
Yep, and be seen and stuff. So it's probably not a bad idea to have some kind of home base, some kind of connection with a hobby shop, or something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. If you have a local hobby shop or a local comic shop that plays D&D and has open tables, talk to them about it first. Be like, hey, I'm a DM. I want to get new players. Set up yourself at a table with maybe one or two people that you know, and have open spots in your table for new people or people around the room to come hang out and play games with you, and go from there. I mean, that's basically how I started. I started DMing at a hobby shop out of necessity almost, and the opportunity came around where people were like, hey, we want to pay you, and you could be that driving force as a DM. You could be like, hey, I've been giving you these amount of sessions that are awesome, and you guys have loved it so much. Maybe next time you all kick in $5 and we get a little bit of compensation going, or maybe you talk to the hobby store about hiring you as a part-time DM. I think there's a bunch of different avenues you could go.
Great. No, that's good advice. All right, so let us know what you think. Have you ever paid for Dungeons and Dragons? Do you think that's weird? Is it something you'll never do? Is it something you're interested in trying yourself? Maybe you want to be a DM for hire? Get in touch with us. everyeditionrpg@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out everyeditionrpg.com with links to all of our socials, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We got our Patreon, and you can find links to the video podcast here on YouTube, and also the podcast on Apple Podcast and Spotify.
And if you have any questions on how to get started DMing, or you have questions on how to make that jump to DMing for hire, feel free to drop us a line, and I'll answer your questions.
Great.
All right, it's time to loot the body. Today's Loot the Body is Dragontown by JP Coovert.
Yes, it is. So JP Coovert is an artist and an author who I back on Patreon.
Okay.
And he, for $12 a month, you get a zine. And that
Every month?
Every month. And that includes postage. It's awesome. He started off with Dragontown as part of Zine Month, Zine Quest. Last year, Zine Quest 3 was when Dragontown was launched, and it was the first zine of his that I became aware of. And he then turned that into an ongoing Patreon that has had so far, I believe, in addition to Dragontown, 4 additional issues.
Nice.
About to release a new issue called the Red Growth, which looks like sort of like mushroom people and stuff like that. The style of Dragontown, very cartoony, very kid-friendly, just like a sort of like joyful Saturday morning feel that I get from his work. And he is one of these annoyingly talented people who not only can tell a good story, but also is an incredible artist. But I'm happy to back him every month because I get a wonderful zine like Dragontown.
Are these 5th edition?
They are. So Dragontown is and the subsequent Flick Silver Pen guides are all for 5th edition, and so they are ready to rock and roll for your table. They're great for kids. They really are family friendly adventures, ones that I use with my family, and this first one, Dragontown, sort of is the sandbox, right, of the town. Oh. There's a gold dragon that's the mayor of the town.
Sure.
And subsequently, then the next each month sort of starts to expand the landscape of Dragontown beyond to the mountain ranges.
So it's all the same world.
It's all the same world. He's doing world building. So each issue builds this world. And like I said, it's really a fantastic, captivating cartoon art style. He also makes, JP Coovert also makes buttons and stickers that have his characters on them. He's got some fruit people and vegetable people, nice. I think, that are really cute kind of thing. But totally worth checking out. Look for JP Coovert on Patreon. And if you want to get started, Dragontown I have seen on Exalted Funeral nice. For $15. So it's currently sold out as the recording of this, but they've still got the section for it on their store. So hoping they get restocked so people can check out Dragontown and then join the Patreon. And you can get the back issues too if nice. You join the Patreon. Nice. So check it out. Dragontown, JP Coovert. Great recommendation for Zine Month, because he's doing it every month. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. This has been another episode of Every Edition, your tabletop RPG talk show. Don't forget to check out everyeditionrpg.com for links to all of our socials. Send us a note at everyeditionrpg@gmail.com, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.